My name is Nadia, and I'm 39 years old. If someone had told me 5 years ago that I would one day be treated like an unwanted guest in my own home, I would have laughed in disbelief. Back then, I thought I had everything: a husband I adored, two stepchildren I was proud to help raise, and a household I worked tirelessly to support. But life has a cruel way of exposing the truth, and mine was revealed not through honesty, but through whispers, neglect, and ultimately, betrayal. I met Adrian when I was 32. He was charming in a quiet, confident way, handsome, with a sharp mind for business and a smile that made me feel safe. He had two children from his previous marriage, Felicity and Jonah. They were teenagers at the time, polite but distant. I understood I wasn't their mother, and I didn't want to replace her. I only wanted to be a positive presence in their lives. Over the years, I tried everything to make them feel loved. I showed up to Felicity's school plays, clapped the loudest at Jonah's soccer games, and spent countless hours helping them with homework, projects, and college applications. I wanted them to know I was on their side. And for a while, it seemed to work. Felicity even hugged me once after I paid for her summer music camp when Adrian's finances were tight. Jonah beamed when I surprised him with his first car, something I had worked overtime to afford. I thought we were building a family, slowly but surely. Adrian had his struggles, but I never wavered. When his business collapsed, I dipped into my inheritance to cover his debts. When the house payments were due, I took on extra hours at work. I didn't complain. I believed in him. I believed in us. But then, everything changed. It started with my health. A sudden illness left me bedridden for weeks. At first, I brushed it off, just a rough patch, I told myself. But the fatigue lingered, and my strength slipped away. Suddenly, I wasn't the woman holding everything together. I was the woman who needed care. And that's when their attitudes shifted. Adrian became distant, as though my vulnerability made me less worthy of his attention. He stopped sitting by my bedside, stopped asking how I was feeling. Instead, he focused on practical matters: bills, accounts, responsibilities. He treated me less like a partner and more like a liability. Felicity and Jonah followed his lead. Their visits to my room grew less frequent, and when they did come, it was with forced smiles that vanished the second they walked out the door. I overheard them muttering once in the hallway, Jonah's voice sharp with irritation. "She's just dead weight now. Everything she had should have been ours anyway." Those words cut deeper than any illness ever could. But I told myself not to lose hope. Maybe they were just stressed. Maybe it was a moment of weakness. I convinced myself that love doesn't disappear so easily. I had given them years of my life, after all. Surely they wouldn't discard me like this. Still, I couldn't ignore the changes. Meals were eaten without me more often than not. When I asked for help with small things, a glass of water, a blanket size of annoyance answered me. Sometimes I'd catch Adrian scrolling through his phone, his face set in a cold, distracted expression, while I struggled to sit upright in bed. And yet, I clung to the hope that if I just got better, things would return to normal. That hope was the thread that kept me from unraveling completely. But deep down, a quiet fear began to grow. I had poured myself into this family, sacrificed everything for them: my money, my time, my energy. And now, in my weakest state, they were pulling away, leaving me to face my frailty alone. At night, when the house was quiet and the pain in my body kept me awake, I would stare at the ceiling and wonder, did they ever love me at all? Or was I always just a means to an end? I remembered every sacrifice: how I had covered tuition payments for Felicity when Adrian couldn't, how I had paid off Jonah's car loan in full, how I had used my inheritance to bail Adrian out when his business went under. I thought I was investing in our future as a family, but what if I had only been buying their tolerance? I pushed the thought away, refusing to believe it. But the doubt gnawed at me, growing stronger with each passing day. Until one night, that doubt became certainty. I had woken from another restless sleep, my throat dry, my body aching. I shuffled slowly down the hallway toward the kitchen for water, careful not to make noise. But as I reached the living room, I heard laughter, glasses clinking, voices that were too loud, too joyful for the hour. Curious and confused, I crept closer, peering from the shadows. Adrian sat with Felicity and Jonah, champagne glasses raised. Their faces glowed with wicked delight. To finally being rid of her, Adrian said, his smile cruel. Felicity giggled, lifting her glass higher. Then everything will be ours. Jonah smirked, adding, about time. She's nothing but a burden now. I gripped the wall for balance as their laughter echoed through the room. In that moment, every sacrifice, every act of love, every dream I had poured into this family turned to ash. They weren't waiting for me to get better, they were waiting for me to die. But one night, I would hear words that shattered every illusion I had left. Word count, 2. 1010. Emotional depth plus betrayal setup introduces key characters and dynamic. Ends on a shocking cliffhanger. Would you like me to move forward with Section 2, the cruel celebration? Is approximately equal to 1000. Where Nadia fully absorbs the horror of overhearing their toast and begins to plot. You said, Section 2, the cruel celebration, 1050 words, J revenge stories. They said, perfect, let's continue. Here's Section 2 expanded into a 1050-word narrative script, building directly from Section 1. Section 2, the cruel celebration, is approximately equal to 1050 words. It was during one sleepless night that I overheard the truth. The laughter that drifted down the hallway that night didn't sound like the laughter of a family. It wasn't joy or warmth, it was sharp, biting, like the sound of wolves circling their prey. I stood frozen in the shadows, my body trembling, every nerve alive with dread. From where I stood, I could see them clearly, Adrian in his favorite armchair. Felicity curled up on the sofa, Jonah leaning against the wall. Each of them with champagne glasses raised, the golden bubbles catching the flicker of candlelight. To finally being rid of her, Adrian said, his voice low but laced with satisfaction. Felicity's laugh rang out like a bell. About time. She's been dragging us down for years. Once she's gone, everything will finally be ours. Jonah tipped back his glass, smirking. Yeah, no more pretending, no more dead weight, just freedom. I clutched the doorframe, my nails digging into the wood. My heart pounded so violently I thought they might hear it. For years, I had believed these people loved me, or at least cared enough to tolerate me. I had spent countless nights working late, making sacrifices, pouring everything I had into their futures. And here they were, toasting to my death as if it were the happiest day of their lives. Every word they spoke sliced into me like a knife. Adrian leaned back in his chair, his face flushed from drink. Once she's gone, we'll finally have the money to breathe again. The house, the savings, everything, it'll all come back to us. The savings. That word echoed in my head, making my stomach twist. Was that all I had ever been to him? A source of money? Not a partner, not a wife, but a walking bank account he couldn't wait to collect. On? Felicity grinned, swirling her glass. I already know what I'm doing with my share. First thing, I'm getting out of this boring town. Maybe New York, maybe LA, somewhere glamorous. Jonah snorted. Of course you'd waste it. Me? I'm getting a new car, the kind people actually respect. No more used junk. The casual way they planned their future built on the foundation of my absence made bile rise in my throat. And then Adrian's voice cut through, firm and commanding. Enough. We'll divide things properly when the time comes. For now, all that matters is patience. She's fading. It won't be long now. I nearly collapsed where I stood. Fading. That's how he described me. Not fighting. Not recovering. Fading. I stumbled back into the shadows before they could notice me. My breath ragged, my chest tight. The walls of the house I had worked so hard to protect now felt like a prison. Their laughter followed me all the way back to my room, echoing in my ears until it was all I could hear. I sat on the edge of my bed, shaking uncontrollably. Every memory of kindness, every sacrifice, every ounce of love I had poured into this family now felt poisoned. Had it all been a lie? Had they been waiting for this moment all along? Tears streamed down my face as I realized the horrifying truth. I was not their loved one. I was their obstacle, their payday, their inconvenience. For the first time, the love I had clung to felt dead. But as the night dragged on and my tears dried, something else began to stir within me. Rage. Cold, quiet, deliberate rage. They thought I was fading. They thought I was powerless. They thought I would quietly slip away, leaving them to toast their victory over my grave. But they were wrong. I still had something they had forgotten, something they couldn't touch, something that remained in my name alone. My old savings account. For years I had left it untouched. Adrian believed he controlled every dollar in this household, but he was blind to the one account I never surrendered. It wasn't just money, it was independence. It was survival, and now it would become my weapon. That night, lying awake in the darkness, I made a vow. I would not let them win. They wanted me gone, but I would outlast their cruelty. I would outthink them, and when the time came, I would leave them with nothing but the bitter taste of their own greed. The next morning, the house looked the same as always. Felicity hummed as she scrolled through her phone. Jonah wolfed down cereal before rushing out. Adrian muttered about bills as he left for the day. But nothing was the same for me. I smiled faintly as they ignored me, pretending to be too weak to notice their neglect. Inside, though, I was already planning. That night's toast had broken me, yes, but it had also awakened me. They had revealed their true selves, and in doing so, they had handed me the key to their downfall. I sat in my room with a notebook on my lap, the pages filling with ideas, strategies, reminders. Celeste, the nurse who had recently been assigned to help me, peeked in to check on me. She frowned at my restless energy, but I only told her I was fine. I wasn't ready to share my plan, not yet. Instead, I wrote one sentence at the top of the page, circling it twice. They think I'm fading, but I'm about to rise. And with each passing day, as their cruelty grew, so did my determination. And in that moment, I decided to rewrite the ending they thought they had planned for me. Word count. 2. 1052. Builds directly on the betrayal from Section 1. Emotional devastation rage, first spark of revenge, ends with a strong vow and cliffhanger. Would you like me to now move ahead with Section 3, remembering my sacrifices, is approximately equal to 1,000 words, where Nadia recalls all she gave to them and strengthens her resolve? You said, Section 3, remembering my sacrifices, 1,000 words, J. Revenge Stories said. Great, let's dive into Section 3, giving Nadia's reflections emotional weight while pushing her resolve toward revenge. Here's the full is approximately equal to 1,000-word narrative. Section 3, remembering my sacrifices, is approximately equal to 1,000 words. As I lay awake that night, memories of everything I had given them flooded my mind. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the echo of their laughter. Adrian's smug voice, Felicity's cruel giggle, Jonah's mocking tone. They replayed like a broken record until I wanted to scream. I stared at the ceiling, my chest aching, and the memories began to surface. Memories of every sacrifice I had made for the people who now toasted to my death. When I first married Adrian, he had been struggling. His once promising business was collapsing under debt, and he carried the weight of failure in his eyes. I remember holding his hands and promising him, "We'll get through this together." I believed those words with my whole heart. I took the inheritance my parents left me, the nest egg meant for my future, and used it to pay off his debts. Every dollar I poured into him was given with love, no hesitation, no regrets. I thought I was investing in our marriage, in a secure future together. But now, when I looked back, I realized he had never thanked me. Not once. Then there was Felicity. She was only 17 when I entered her life, a sharp-tongued teenager with big dreams of being an actress. Her scholarships didn't cover everything, so I took extra shifts at work to pay for her college tuition. I drove her to auditions, sat through endless rehearsals, even stood in the rain outside venues just to make sure she got home safely. I remember the day I handed her the tuition check she couldn't afford on her own. She hugged me then, her arms tight around my neck, her voice trembling with gratitude. "Thank you, Nadia. You're the best." I thought that hug meant I had earned a place in her heart. Now I saw it for what it was. A temporary acknowledgement, quickly forgotten once her needs were met. And Jonah quiet, reserved, obsessed with cars from the moment I met him. On his 18th birthday, Adrian couldn't afford a gift, so I scraped together my savings to help him buy his first car. His face lit up with joy that day. And for a fleeting moment, I felt like his mother in more than name. But that joy faded quickly. By the time he turned 20, his gratitude had soured into entitlement. Now he spoke of me as dead weight, forgetting entirely the woman who made his dreams possible. Lying in bed, I thought about the nights I worked late at the office, my body aching, while Adrian sat at home networking with friends. I thought about the vacations I canceled because Felicity's tuition had come due, or Jonah needed new tires. I thought about the countless little sacrifices, skipping haircuts, wearing old clothes, saying no to small luxuries because I wanted them to have everything. And for what? So they could laugh about my death. Tears rolled down my cheeks, soaking the pillow. For years, I believed sacrifice was proof of love. I thought that if I gave enough, they would see me as part of the family. That if I proved myself again and again, they would eventually accept me. But the truth was cruel. My sacrifices were never enough. They hadn't seen them as love. They had seen them as entitlement, as resources owed to them. My heart ached with grief, but beneath the grief was something stronger: anger. A fire that burned hotter the longer I thought about everything I had done for them. They thought I was powerless, but in truth, I was the reason they had the lives they lived. Without me, Adrian would have drowned in debt. Without me, Felicity would never have stepped foot in a college classroom. Without me, Jonah would never have driven his shiny first car. I was the foundation they had built their comfort on, and now they wanted to bury that foundation 6 feet under, like I was nothing but a stone in their path. No, I would not let them erase me. I sat up slowly, clutching my chest as another memory surfaced: my mother's words. When I was young, she once told me, "Nadia, never give so much of yourself that you disappear. People will take until there's nothing left, unless you teach them you are not disposable." I had ignored her wisdom for years, thinking love was about endless giving. Now I understood. My mother had been right. I rose from bed, weak but determined, and shuffled to the desk in the corner of my room. Pulling out my journal, I began to write furiously. Every sacrifice, every dollar, every betrayal. I listed them one by one, as if recording them could remind me of my worth. By the time I finished, my hands ached, but my heart felt lighter. I had proof, if only to myself, that I was not worthless. That I had given, and given, and given, and received nothing but cruelty in return. I closed the journal and whispered into the darkness. "You think I'm fading, but you've only made me stronger." That night, a plan began to take shape in my mind. A plan not born of bitterness, but of justice. They had forgotten something crucial, something they would regret overlooking: my bank account, my name, my control. As dawn broke, I looked out the window and watched the sky shift from black to pale pink. It felt symbolic, like a new beginning. The family who toasted to my death thought they were waiting for my ending. But I was just beginning to write the next chapter, and that one detail would become the key to my revenge. Word count: 2. 1008. Emotional reflection on sacrifices, grief, anger, resolve. Builds momentum toward financial revenge. Strong opening plus closing cliffhanger. Would you like me to continue with Section 4, The Secret They Forgot, is approximately equal to 1,000 words, where Nadia reveals her hidden financial weapon and begins to quietly prepare her plan? You said, Section 4, The Secret They Forgot, 1,000 words, J. Revenge Stories said. All right, here's Section 4 fully expanded into a 1,000-word narrative script, where Nadia realizes and embraces the hidden weapon in her financial independence. Section 4, The Secret They Forgot, is approximately equal to 1,000 words. What they didn't know was that the largest bank account was still in my name. In the days after that cruel toast, I moved through the house like a ghost. Adrian, Felicity, and Jonah thought they had already won. Their smiles came easier, their tones were lighter, as if they were already tasting freedom from me. They didn't bother to hide it anymore. But they had overlooked something vital, something I had never told them, something that had remained entirely mine. Long before I met Adrian, when I was still single and working my way up at my firm, I opened a savings account in my own name. It was meant to be a cushion, a way to ensure I'd always have a foundation beneath me. When Adrian and I married, I merged almost everything else into our shared accounts, trusting him completely. But that one account, I kept it separate. At first, it wasn't intentional secrecy. It was just habit, an old account that I never got around to closing. But as the years went on, I realized how important it was to have something untouched. I deposited money there whenever I could, bonuses, small inheritances, side projects. Quietly, steadily, it grew. And by the time Adrian's business had failed, by the time I used my main inheritance to pull him out of debt, I still had that hidden account. He never asked about it, and I never volunteered the information. Now, as I sat at my desk with my laptop open, I stared at the balance on the screen. The numbers glowed back at me like a secret lifeline. Adrian believed everything was under his control, but this account, this one forgotten thread, was entirely mine. It wasn't just money. It was power. As I looked at that account, I felt a surge of strength pulse through me. For so long, I had believed I was at their mercy. That without Adrian's approval, without the children's acceptance, I had no worth. But here was proof that I wasn't powerless. I had the means to take care of myself. I had the means to fight back. I imagined their faces if they ever discovered it. Adrian's smug expression crumbling, Felicity's laughter choking in her throat, Jonah's smirk fading into horror. The thought alone made me smile for the first time in weeks. I knew I couldn't confront them yet. Timing was everything. If I revealed my strength too soon, they would find ways to undermine me. Adrian, especially, would try to manipulate me into handing it over. I had to be careful, meticulous, patient, so I played my part. At breakfast, I sat quietly, spooning food I barely tasted, letting them believe I was weaker each day. Felicity scrolled through her phone, barely glancing up at me. Jonah muttered about his plans to upgrade his car. Adrian sighed dramatically about bills, then waved his hand as if to say, "But soon, all of this will be over." I lowered my eyes, hiding the fire building inside me. They thought I was fading. They thought I was almost gone. But in truth, I was preparing. At night, when the house was silent, I worked in secret. I logged into my account, moving small amounts of money, testing transactions, ensuring no alerts would reach Adrian. I contacted my lawyer discreetly, updating old documents and shifting ownership of assets. Piece by piece, I rebuilt control over my life in the shadows. The secrecy thrilled me. For so long I had lived openly, naively, believing honesty would earn me love. Now I understood the power of silence. By letting them underestimate me, I was building my advantage. Celeste, my nurse, noticed the spark returning to my eyes. "You seem different lately," she said one evening as she helped me into bed. I smiled faintly. Maybe I remembered something important. Something they forgot. She tilted her head curiously but didn't press. I wasn't ready to share everything with her yet. Not until my plan was solid. But inside, I whispered to myself, "They think they hold the future, but I hold the key they've forgotten." Days turned into weeks, and I let the act continue. I coughed louder, walked slower, sighed heavier. Adrian's eyes gleamed with satisfaction, convinced my end was near. Felicity and Jonah whispered about their shares, as though dividing my existence was nothing more than a game. Each word of theirs, each careless chuckle, only fueled my resolve. I started writing notes to myself in my journal, reminders of what I still had, mantras to carry me through. You are not disposable. They need you more than you need them. The account is yours. The power is yours. Every time I felt the sting of their cruelty, I returned to those words. They became my armor. The turning point came one evening when Adrian knocked lightly on my door. He stepped inside with an overly sympathetic smile. "Nadia," he said softly, "you don't need to worry about finances anymore. I've taken care of everything. When the time comes, Felicity and Jonah will be secure." The arrogance in his voice was unbearable. He thought he had won. I forced a weak smile. "That's good to know." He nodded, clearly pleased by my compliance. "You've done enough, just rest now." When he left, I nearly laughed out loud. He had no idea. I sat back on my bed, clutching the notebook where I had written my mantra. My chest swelled with a strange mixture of grief and triumph. They had erased me from their plans, but I was writing my own ending. The account they had forgotten wasn't just my salvation, it would become their undoing. But the first step in my plan would require me to play weaker than ever. Word count to 1004. Builds suspense around the hidden bank account. Nadia shifts from despair to empowerment. Ends with a cliffhanger leading directly to her strategic deception. Would you like me to continue with section 5, pretending to fade? Is approximately equal to 1000 words, where Nadia deliberately acts weaker to lull them deeper into false security. You said, section 5, pretending to fade, 1000 words. J. Revenge Stories said, here's section 5, crafted into a 1000-word narrative script, showing how Nadia plays the role of the dying woman to trap her betrayers in their own greed. Section 5, pretending to fade, is approximately equal to 1000 words. The next morning, I acted like the fragile, helpless woman they wanted me to be. From that day forward, I became an actress in my own home. Every movement, every word, every sigh was calculated. I learned to slump my shoulders just so, to let my voice falter, to move with the deliberate slowness of someone whose body was giving out. Adrian bought it immediately. At breakfast, I pushed food around my plate, pretending I didn't have the strength to eat. He shook his head, pity flickering across his face, but it wasn't real pity. It was the smug satisfaction of a man who believed time was on his side. Felicity noticed too. One afternoon, as she walked past my room, she whispered to Jonah, "She looks worse every day. It won't be long now." They both chuckled, thinking I couldn't hear. But I did. And instead of letting it break me, I stored it away like fuel for the fire burning inside me. The irony was almost laughable. I wasn't fading, I was growing stronger. Celeste, my nurse, made sure of that. Quietly, behind closed doors, she encouraged me to stretch, to eat well, to rebuild my strength piece by piece. She knew my body still had fight left in it. But I told her, don't let them see. Not yet. So in the daylight, I played the part of the fragile woman clinging to her final days. I coughed into tissues, I stained with tea to look worse than I was. I kept blankets wrapped around me, even when I wasn't cold, just to seem frail. I made my voice quiver when I asked for water, as if lifting a glass was too much. The more I shrank, the bolder they became. Adrian stopped hiding his impatience. He no longer asked me how I was feeling, he only muttered about arrangements and finalizing things. He spent long hours on the phone with people I didn't know, always lowering his voice when I passed by. Felicity started spending money more freely. New handbags, new shoes, nights out with friends all charged to cards she assumed would soon be replenished. Jonah grew cockier too, bragging to his friends in the driveway about the freedom he'd have once the old bird was gone. His laughter carried through my window, and every time I heard it, my determination sharpened. I let them believe their fantasy. I let them revel in the illusion that they were weeks away from inheriting everything. The more convinced they were, the sweeter my revenge would taste. At night, I tested the waters with my bank. I made small transfers to accounts in my lawyer's control, tiny movements no one would notice. Every time a transaction cleared, I felt more secure. The safety net was tightening around me, and they didn't even know it. Celeste watched my plan unfold with cautious admiration. "You're stronger than they think," she said one evening, helping me to bed. I gave her a small smile. "That's the point. Let them underestimate me. It's the only way this will work." She nodded but looked troubled. It's dangerous, Nadia. If they find out what you're doing, I cut her off. They won't. They're too blinded by greed to see what's right in front of them. And she knew I was right. The house became a stage, each of us playing roles. Adrian and the children acted like vultures circling their prize, whispering and planning, thinking they were clever. I played the helpless victim, shrinking further each day, making them believe their victory was inevitable. But in the shadows, I was building my counterattack. One afternoon, Adrian brought me a folder of papers. He laid them on my lap with that smug smile I had come to hate. Just sign these, he said gently, as though he were doing me a favor. I glanced down. Legal documents, power of attorney, medical directives, even access to certain accounts, all designed to strip me of the little authority I had left. My hands trembled as I picked up a pen, but not from weakness, from rage. I'll look them over, I whispered, lowering my eyes. Adrian sighed, clearly annoyed, but patted my shoulder like a child. Don't take too long. It's for everyone's benefit. When he left, I tucked the papers into my drawer and locked it. Later that night, I showed them to Celeste. Her eyes widened. He's trying to take everything while you're still alive. I nodded grimly. And he thinks I'm too weak to notice. It was proof of just how far gone he was. He wasn't waiting for my death, he was trying to erase me before it even happened. That night, I added a new note to my journal. They think I'm fading, but they're the ones losing ground. The act continued for weeks. The darker their conversations grew, the lighter I made my presence seem. I coughed more, spoke less, drifted in and out of rooms like a ghost. Adrian even began talking openly about the future, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Don't worry, Nadia, he said one evening. When you're gone, I'll take care of everything. The kids will be fine. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him he had already killed everything between us with his cruelty. But instead, I smiled faintly and whispered, "That's good to know." Inside, though, I was laughing. Because I knew the truth. I wasn't slipping away. I was pulling the rug out from under their feet. Each day of weakness was a mask. Each sigh, each cough, each quiver was part of the performance. They thought they were watching me fade, but really, they were watching the trap close around them. And the best part? They didn't even see it coming. But soon, my weakness would give way to strength they never expected. Word count, 2. 1004. Shows Nadia's deliberate performance of frailty builds tension with Adrian's false sympathy and legal trickery. Ends with her secretly preparing to flip the power dynamic. Would you like me to continue with section 6? A new alley is approximately equal to 1,000 words, where Celeste steps more fully into the story as Nadia's confidant and key witness. You said, Section 6. A new ally, 1,000 words, J. Revenge Stories said. Here's Section 6 expanded into a 1,000-word narrative script, where Celeste becomes central to Nadia's plan and survival. Section 6. A new ally is approximately equal to 1,000 words. It was during this time that I met someone who would become crucial to my plan. Celeste wasn't like the other nurses who rotated through the house. Most of them were polite but detached, in and out quickly, doing only what was required. Celeste was different. She was 27, with a gentle voice and steady hands, but beneath her kindness was a sharpness I recognized immediately. She noticed things. The first day she arrived, she adjusted my pillows with care, then looked directly into my eyes. You're stronger than you let them think, aren't you? The question startled me. My mouth went dry. For a moment, I worried she had seen through my act. But then she smiled softly. Don't worry. I won't say a word. That was the beginning. Over the weeks that followed, Celeste became more than a caretaker, she became my confidant. I hadn't realized how starved I was for genuine conversation until she sat by my bedside one evening and asked, "Do you want to tell me what's really going on here?" At first, I hesitated. I had guarded my secret so carefully, terrified that if I spoke it aloud, it might somehow slip into the wrong hands. But something about Celeste's calm presence disarmed me, so I told her. I told her about the cruel toast I had overheard, about the laughter, the way they had celebrated my supposed decline. I told her about Adrian's documents, about Felicity's greedy shopping sprees, Jonah's gloating. And finally, I told her about my hidden bank account, the one they had forgotten. The one that gave me power. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every detail. When I finished, she sat back and exhaled slowly. Nadia, they don't just want you gone. They're counting on it. They've already spent what they think is theirs. I nodded, my throat tight. That's why I have to outplay them. That's why I'm pretending to fade. Let them grow careless. Let them reveal just how greedy they are. Celeste's eyes hardened, and when the time comes, I clenched my fists. They'll get nothing. From that day on, Celeste wasn't just my nurse, she was my ally. She began to quietly observe them, just as I had. When Adrian snapped impatiently because I hadn't signed his stack of papers yet, she noted it. When Felicity mocked me under her breath, Celeste heard it. When Jonah bragged about the fortune waiting for him, she remembered every word. Witnesses matter, she told me one night as she helped me with my medication. If this goes to court someday, it can't just be your word against theirs. And I'll be there. I'll testify to everything I've seen. Her loyalty brought me comfort I hadn't felt in months. I no longer felt completely alone in that house of wolves. I had someone who believed me. Someone who saw the truth. But she offered more than loyalty. Celeste helped me physically too. While the family believed I was wasting away, Celeste quietly kept me strong. She encouraged me to eat well, brought vitamins, and guided me through light exercises to maintain my strength. To them, I looked frail. To her, she could see the fight returning. "You're not fading," she said with a small smile one morning as I completed a set of stretches. "You're preparing for war." Her words lit a spark in me. Together, we began crafting subtle strategies. Celeste suggested I document everything, every cruel comment, every suspicious action, every attempt Adrian made to push papers in front of me. "Keep a record," she said firmly. "That way, when the time comes, you'll have proof." So I did. My journal became more than an emotional outlet, it became a log of evidence. Dates, times, words. The ledger of their betrayal. Celeste also helped me refine my act. "Don't overdo it," she warned. "If you look too sick, they might try to move you into full-time care and gain control faster. Just enough weakness to satisfy them, but not enough to trigger outside intervention." It was a delicate balance, but with her guidance, I mastered it. Meanwhile, Adrian's impatience grew. He brought more documents, each one designed to strip me of authority. He masked it as kindness, telling me, "You don't need to worry about these things anymore, let me handle them." Each time, I smiled weakly, took the papers, and tucked them away. Each time, Celeste and I reviewed them later, shaking our heads at the audacity. "They're digging their own graves," she muttered once, flipping through Adrian's so-called arrangements. "Yes," I said softly, a smile tugging at my lips. "And I'm the one holding the shovel." The more Adrian and the children celebrated their imagined future, the more careless they became. Felicity began planning trips she couldn't afford. Jonah bragged about upgrades for a car he didn't yet own. Adrian even confided to a friend on the phone that things would soon be settled. All the while, I listened, watched, waited. One evening, Celeste found me staring at the balance in my hidden account. My eyes burned with determination. "This is my weapon," I whispered. "This is what will protect me," she nodded. "Then use it wisely. Don't let them take it from you, not even a cent." For the first time since the night of that cruel toast, I felt a deep sense of control. Not complete, not final, but enough to give me hope. Enough to remind me that I wasn't powerless. I looked at Celeste, gratitude welling in my chest. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she smiled, squeezing my hand. "You won't have to find out. I'm here until the end of this, however it plays out." Her words settled over me like a promise. I wasn't alone anymore. I had someone in my corner. Someone willing to fight with me. That night, as I wrote in my journal, I added a new line beneath my mantras. They think I'm fading. But with Celeste by my side, I am unstoppable. But having an ally meant I had the courage to take the next step. Word count to 1007. Celeste emerges as confidant and strategist. Builds emotional support for Nadia strengthens. The theme of deception and quiet preparation ends on cliffhanger toward next phase. Would you like me to move forward? With Section 7, the test is approximately equal to 1,000 words, where Nadia begins probing Adrian and the children to measure just how far their greed will go. You said, Section 7, the test, 1,000 words. J. Revenge Stories said. Here's Section 7 developed into a full 1,000-word narrative script, where Nadia begins testing just how deep Adrian and the children's greed runs. Section 7, the test, is approximately equal to 1,000 words. I decided to test just how greedy they had become. By now, weeks had passed since I first overheard the toast to my death. The rage that once consumed me had hardened into something, sharper strategy. With Celeste at my side, I was no longer just surviving their cruelty. I was studying it, shaping it, preparing to turn it back on them. But before I could make my move, I needed to know the full extent of their greed. How far would they go if they believed I had nothing left? How quickly would they show their true faces? One morning over coffee, I staged my first test. My voice weak, I said casually to Adrian. I closed out some old accounts yesterday. Just wanted to make sure everything was in order for when the time comes. I watched him carefully. His eyes lit up not with sadness, not with fear of losing me, but with something darker. Greed. All in my name now? He asked smoothly, trying to sound nonchalant. But I heard the eagerness beneath the surface. I gave a slow, shaky nod, pretending exhaustion. Yes, all taken care of. His lips curled into a smile he tried to hide by sipping his coffee. Good, that's good. Inside, my stomach churned. That smile told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't mourning me, he was counting down the days. Later that day, I heard Felicity bragging to Jonah in the kitchen. Once she's gone, I'm getting out of here. I already started looking at apartments. Fancy ones. I deserve it. Jonah laughed, his voice dripping with arrogance. Forget apartments. I'm buying a car worth showing off. No more used junk. Something people will respect me for. Their words confirmed my suspicions. They already believed my closing accounts meant the money was theirs. I bit my lip to keep from smiling. They were walking straight into the web I was weaving. Over the next week, I ran more small tests. I mentioned to Felicity, I hope the money helps you finish your degree. I've worried about it, but now you'll be fine. She grinned and hugged me quickly, too shallowly before rushing off to call her friends. Within an hour, she was online, shopping, her cart full of things she couldn't possibly afford. With Jonah, I played a different angle. I know how much you love cars, I said one evening, my voice faint. I'm sure you'll finally get the one you've been dreaming about. His eyes widened, and he actually thanked me for the first time in months. But the thanks wasn't for my years of sacrifice, or for the gift of his first car. It was for the illusion of money he thought was coming his way. I wrote each interaction down in my journal, cataloging their greed like evidence in a trial. Celeste read through it one evening and shook her head in disgust. They don't even see you anymore, she said. All they see is a payday. I nodded, my jaw tight. Exactly. And the more they reveal, the stronger my case becomes. Because that was the truth, I wasn't just planning revenge. I was gathering proof. If this ever went to court, if Adrian tried to claim I wasn't of sound mind, I would have page after page of evidence, plus Celeste's testimony. One night, I decided to push Adrian further. He came into my room with another folder of papers. His eyes had that same practiced look of concern, but I could see through it now. Nadia, he said softly. I know this is hard, but you need to think about the future. About the kids. These documents will make sure everything is handled properly when the time comes. I opened the folder slowly, scanning the pages. More power of attorney documents. More transfers of authority. He was trying to strip me of every right I still had. My hand trembled as I picked up the pen, and for a moment I let him believe I was about to sign. His eyes gleamed. Then I set the pen down. "I'm too tired tonight," I whispered. "Maybe tomorrow." Frustration flashed in his eyes, quickly masked with a sigh. "Of course, rest. We'll go over it again soon." When he left, Celeste closed the door and hissed, "He's getting desperate." I smiled faintly. Good. The more desperate he gets, the sloppier he'll become. The very next day, I overheard him on the phone in his study. His voice was low, but the walls were thin. "Yes," he said. "She's weaker every day. It won't be long. Once the paperwork's signed, we'll have everything. Just hold tight." My blood boiled, but I forced myself to remain calm. I scribbled down every word in my journal. Adrian thought he was winning. Felicity thought she was shopping her way to happiness. Jonah thought he was on the verge of luxury. But what none of them realized was that I had already secured my savings. That hidden account was locked, protected, and growing by the day. Everything they thought they were waiting for had already slipped through their fingers. Their greed was the noose tightening around their necks, and I was the one holding the rope. That night, I sat with Celeste and showed her the entries in my journal. "They've revealed everything," I said quietly. "Their greed, their impatience, their complete disregard for me as a human being. And I let them. I drew it out of them, little by little." Celeste placed her hand over mine, her eyes fierce. "You're not just surviving this, Nadia. You're winning." A smile tugged at my lips. For the first time, I believed her. But first, I needed to disappear from their plans entirely. Word count 2. 1002 shows, Nadia testing her family's greed with staged conversations. Exposes Adrian's push for paperwork. Felicity and Jonah's reckless spending. Ends with her planning to disappear from their expectations. Would you like me to move into Section 8, Disappearing Act, is approximately equal to 1,000 words, where Nadia stages a health scare to make her enemies reveal even more? You said, Section 8, Disappearing Act, 1,000 words. J. Revenge Stories said, here's Section 8, written as a full is approximately equal to 1,000-word narrative script where Nadia stages her disappearance from their plans. Section 8 Disappearing Act is approximately equal to 1,000 words. If they thought I was gone, they would reveal everything. The tests had worked. Adrian's greed was naked, Felicity's entitlement louder than ever, and Jonah's arrogance was impossible to ignore. But I knew they hadn't yet revealed the full extent of their plans. They still thought they had to keep just enough of a mask for appearances, so I decided it was time to take the mask off entirely by disappearing from their lives for a short while. The idea came late one night, as Celeste adjusted my blankets. "They already believe you're fading," she whispered. "What if you let them think you've reached the edge?" I stared at her, my pulse quickening. It was risky, terrifying even. But she was right. If they thought I was as good as gone, their greed would consume them. They would act without restraint. And I would be watching. So we planned it carefully. The opportunity came one evening at dinner. My appetite was gone anyway. Nerves twisting my stomach. I sat quietly as Adrian droned on about bills and Felicity bragged about a shopping spree. Then, just as Jonah made a joke about finally being free, I clutched my chest and gasped. The fork clattered from my hand. My body went limp. "Mom?" Felicity's voice was sharp, but not with concern, with panic. Jonah leapt back, his face pale. Adrian froze for a split second, then hurried to my side. But even in that moment, his eyes weren't wide with love, they were calculating. He pulled out his phone and called an ambulance, his tone strangely detached. "She collapsed," he said. "Yes. She's breathing. No rush. Just send someone. No rush." Those words pierced me. When the paramedics arrived, I let my eyelids flutter, let my body sag as though every ounce of strength had drained away. They carried me out on a stretcher while Adrian hovered nearby, wearing the mask of a concerned husband for the neighbors who peeked out of their windows. But once at the hospital, I whispered to Celeste, who had ridden with me, that she was the only one I trusted. "Don't tell them everything," I murmured. "Tell them only what they need to know." She nodded firmly, her grip reassuring on my hand. At the hospital, the doctors kept me for observation. I played my part perfectly, weak, silent, unresponsive at times. When Adrian came to visit, he sat stiffly in the chair, his expression more annoyed than worried. "She's stable," Celeste told him one afternoon. He sighed. "Stable. Right." His lips pressed into a thin line. "How much longer until she—" He didn't finish the sentence. Celeste's eyes flicked to me, but she didn't betray me. Instead, she said coolly, "That's hard to predict." Adrian nodded, his jaw tightening. He didn't ask me how I felt. He didn't touch my hand. He didn't even look me in the eye. He just left, muttering something about arrangements. Felicity and Jonah didn't bother visiting much. When they did, their conversations were shockingly casual. "I heard apartments downtown are leasing fast," Felicity said one afternoon, glancing at her nails. "I'll have to lock one down soon," Jonah smirked. "Once the money's settled, you can get whatever you want. I've already got my eye on a Mustang." They spoke as if I weren't even there, as if I had already disappeared. From my hospital bed, I took it all in. Each careless word, each selfish plan. Celeste and I exchanged glances, silent but knowing. The more they revealed, the stronger my case became. Back at home, Adrian grew bolder. Celeste heard him on the phone with a friend one evening. "It won't be long, she's barely holding on. Once she's gone, we'll divide everything." Finally, some relief. Those words, overheard and repeated to me by Celeste, were like daggers. Also evidence. Proof that he wasn't grieving, wasn't suffering, wasn't preparing to honor my memory. He was waiting like a predator for his prey to fall. After a week, the doctors discharged me. Celeste wheeled me back into the house, where Adrian greeted me with a thin smile. "You're home," he said flatly, as though the words cost him effort. "Yes," I whispered. "For however long I have left." His eyes flickered with something I recognized instantly. Relief. That night, I overheard them again. In the living room, glasses clinked. Not champagne this time, but wine. Still, the tone was the same. "Just a matter of time now," Jonah chuckled darkly. "Feels like we're already there." I lay in my bed upstairs, my heart pounding, every word searing itself into my memory. They weren't just waiting, they were celebrating. Again. And once again, I was listening. Celeste came to my side after they had gone to bed. "You heard?" she whispered. I nodded, tears in my eyes. "They really believe I'm gone." She squeezed my hand. "Then your plan is working. They're showing their true faces. Now you just have to decide when to strike." I looked out the window into the night, the faint glow of the city in the distance. For so long I had felt powerless, cornered, discarded. But now I realized I had something far greater than power. I had knowledge. I had their confessions, their greed, their impatience, all laid bare. I wasn't the one disappearing. They were. They had erased themselves from my heart long ago. But the day I returned would shatter their false sense of victory. Word count, to 1004. Nadia stages collapse, plays along at the hospital. Adrian, Felicity, and Jonah expose themselves further. Builds suspense toward her big reveal. Would you like me to continue with Section 9? The pretend farewell is approximately equal to 1,000 words. Where Nadia comes back home appearing weaker than ever, but secretly preparing to spring her trap? You said, Section 9, the pretend farewell, 1,000 words. J. Revenge Stories said. Here's Section 9, written into a 1,000-word narrative script, showing Nadia's return home and the cruel farewell her family plans, while she prepares her trap. Section 9. The pretend farewell is approximately equal to 1,000 words. They were convinced I was nearly gone, so I gave them a performance. When the hospital discharged me, I returned home in a wheelchair. Celeste pushed me gently up the front steps while Adrian watched from the doorway. His expression carefully blank. Felicity and Jonah hovered behind him, trying and failing to look concerned. "Take it slow," Adrian muttered, as though the words were for show more than for me. I slumped in the chair, my face pale, my movements sluggish. Every gesture was calculated. To them, I was a woman in her final days, drifting toward the inevitable. To me, I was an actress, playing the role of my life. They believed it completely. Within days, they began whispering openly. I'd catch Felicity's voice drifting down the hall. "She looks worse than ever. Maybe a week, tops." Jonah would chuckle in response, adding, "Then it's party time." Celeste and I exchanged secret glances whenever we overheard. They thought they were watching me fade. What they didn't know was that I was sharpening my blade, preparing to cut through their lies. The act extended into meals. I pushed food around my plate, barely eating, though I'd saved enough strength in private moments with Celeste's help. Felicity began setting her plate before me with a little too much eagerness, as though she were waiting for the moment she'd never have to again. Jonah avoided eye contact altogether, his impatience written on his face. Adrian grew bolder. One evening, he suggested holding a quiet family toast in the living room. "It's been a stressful time," he said, forcing a sigh. "We could all use a little relief." I agreed with a weak nod, hiding the storm raging inside me. Relief. That's what he called celebrating my impending death. That night, I listened from my room as they gathered in the living room, their laughter muffled but unmistakable. I strained to hear their words. "To almost being free," Adrian said, his voice low but triumphant. "To finally getting what we deserve," Felicity chimed, her laughter sharp. Jonah chuckled. "To never having to deal with her again." The clinking of glasses echoed through the house. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Instead, I gripped the arms of my chair, whispering to myself, "Let them toast. Let them think they've won. Soon, they'll learn the truth." In the days that followed, I kept the act going. I groaned when I moved. I let my head droop when they entered the room. When Adrian asked me to sign papers, I told him faintly, "Soon, just not today." Each delay frustrated him more, his mask of patience slipping. Felicity grew reckless. She ordered clothes, jewelry, and gadgets online, packages arriving daily at the door. Jonah bragged to his friends about the car he'd buy, strutting around the driveway like a king already crowned. Celeste noticed everything. "They've written you off completely," she said one evening as she massaged my stiff hands. "Good," I replied, a smile tugging at my lips. The deeper they sink into their greed, the harder the fall will be. The final straw came one evening when Adrian entered my room, papers in hand again. His tone was tight with impatience. "Nadia," he said, "you can't keep putting this off. We need to finalize things. It's irresponsible to wait." I looked up at him, my eyes glassy. "Irresponsible?" I whispered. "I thought you wanted me to rest." He pressed the papers toward me. "Rest, yes, but this is important." My fingers brushed the pen. I let them tremble, then dropped it deliberately, as though I lacked the strength. "Tomorrow," I murmured. He exhaled sharply, his mask cracking for just a second. "Fine. Tomorrow." Then he stormed out, muttering under his breath. Celeste stepped in moments later, shaking her head. "He's losing patience. He thinks you're at the edge, and he wants control before you're gone." I smiled faintly. "Then tomorrow, I'll give him a surprise he'll never forget." That night, I sat with my journal and wrote furiously. Every insult, every cruel word, every toast, they were all evidence. Evidence of their betrayal, evidence of their greed. At the top of the page, I wrote, "Tomorrow, I rise." The next evening, Adrian gathered Felicity and Jonah in the living room again. This time, he poured champagne. I listened from the shadows of the hallway, hidden in my chair. To the end of a long road, Adrian said, raising his glass. To finally being rid of her, Felicity smirked. Jonah chuckled, adding, to freedom. Their glasses clinked, their laughter ringing out. But this time, I didn't retreat. I didn't hide. I wheeled myself into the room, my presence startling them. Their laughter died instantly. Glasses frozen midair. Don't stop on my account, I said softly. My voice steady despite the storm in my chest. I'd hate to interrupt your celebration. Their faces drained of color. Adrian stammered. Nadia, you should be resting. I smiled coldly. Oh, I've had plenty of rest. More than enough to hear every word you've spoken these past weeks. Every toast, every plan, every cruel laugh. Felicity's mouth opened, but no words came out. Jonah looked away, shame flickering for only a moment before arrogance returned. I straightened in my chair, my voice rising. You thought I was fading. You thought I was gone. But I was listening. I was planning. Silence fell heavy over the room, their faces pale, their greed exposed. But their celebration was about to turn into their downfall. Word count. 1008. Nadia returns with a dramatic reveal. Confronting their toast keeps the tension high, while still saving the full revenge blow for Section 10 strong cliffhanger. Would you like me to continue with Section 10, the reveal begins, is approximately equal to 1,000 words, where Nadia starts dismantling their illusions and exposes her hidden power? You said, Section 10, the reveal begins, 1,000 words, J Revenge Stories said. Here's Section 10 expanded into a full is approximately equal to 1,000-word narrative script, where Nadia finally begins dismantling her family's illusions. Section 10, the reveal begins, is approximately equal to 1,000 words. The first blow I struck was subtle but devastating. The silence in the living room stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Adrian's champagne glass trembled in his hand. Felicity's eyes darted nervously, and Jonah's smirk faded into something colder. I let the moment linger before speaking again. You toasted to my death, I said softly, my voice sharp as glass. But I'm still here, and I heard every word. Adrian recovered first, forcing a chuckle. Nadia, you misunderstood. We were just coping, trying to make light of a difficult time. Coping? I repeated, my voice rising. By celebrating my death? By planning how you'd spend money that isn't yours? Felicity shifted uncomfortably, her cheeks flushing. We didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did, I cut in. And that's fine, because I have something you don't, the truth. I reached into the pocket of my robe and pulled out 3 envelopes, thick with folded paper. I set one in front of each of them. What's this? Adrian asked warily. Your future, I said simply. They exchanged glances, then tore the envelopes open. Inside, instead of financial statements or deeds, they found handwritten notes, short, brutal. To Adrian, you get nothing, not after what you've done. To Felicity, you get nothing, not after your cruelty. To Jonah, you get nothing, not after your greed. Their heads snapped up, faces pale. What is this? Adrian hissed. It's the truth, I replied calmly. The bank account you've all been waiting on? The inheritance you've toasted to? It's mine, and it will stay mine until the day I decide otherwise. None of you will see a cent. Jonah slammed his fist against the table, his temper flaring. You can't do that. You're dying and the money will come to us. That's how it works. I leaned forward, my voice cold. No, Jonah, that's how you think it works. But I've already made sure the money is secure. In accounts you can't touch, in trusts you'll never access. Felicity's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of rage. You can't just cut us out. We've put up with you for years. Her words hit me like a slap. Put up with me. As though I were a burden they had tolerated, not a woman who had sacrificed everything for them. I sat taller in my chair, my voice steady. You didn't put up with me, I put up with you. I paid for your tuition, Felicity. I bought your car, Jonah. I saved your father from drowning in debt. I gave, and gave, and gave, and in return, you laughed at me, wished me gone, and planned your celebrations. Adrian's face twisted with fury. This isn't your decision. You're not thinking clearly. You're sick, Nadia. You've been manipulated. His eyes flicked to Celeste, who stood quietly behind me. Celeste stepped forward, her chin raised. If you're accusing me, Mr. Blackwood, you should know I've witnessed everything. Every word, every toast, every attempt to push her into signing papers. If this ever goes to court, I'll testify. Adrian's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing. Felicity folded the note in her trembling hands, her voice cracking. You can't just leave us with nothing. I looked at her, my expression hard. I already have. No. Jonah paced the room like a caged animal, muttering curses under his breath. Adrian tried to regain control, his voice low and dangerous. You think you've won because you've hidden a few dollars away. But when you're gone, everything in this house, everything in this marriage, reverts to me. The law will be on my side. I smiled faintly. That's where you're wrong. I've already met with my lawyer. I've already rewritten my will. This house, this marriage, this life, you have no claim on any of it anymore. It's done. The color drained from Adrian's face. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. Felicity broke down, her anger spilling over. So what? You're giving it all to her? She pointed at Celeste, her voice sharp with accusation. No, I said firmly. I'm giving it to myself. To my dignity. To the people who actually stood by me when you abandoned me. Jonah spat bitterly. You're insane. I held his gaze. No, Jonah. I'm free. The room erupted in chaos. Adrian shouted. Felicity sobbed angrily. Jonah stormed toward the door. But I sat still. My heart steady for the first time in years. Celeste placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice calm and strong. You don't owe them anything, Nadia. Not anymore. I nodded slowly, watching as the three people I had once called family crumbled before me. Their greed, their entitlement, their betrayal, it had all caught up to them. And I had only just begun. But this was only the beginning of their consequences. Word count to 1002. Nadia delivers her first devastating blow with the "you get nothing" letters. Adrian's authority cracks. Felicity and Jonah spiral. Celeste solidifies her role as witness, and protector cliffhanger builds to the full fallout in Section 11. Would you like me to continue with Section 11? The fallout is approximately equal to 1,000 words, where the family spirals after Nadia's reveal and their reputation begins to unravel. You said, Section 11, the fallout 1,000 words. J. Revenge Stories said, here's Section 11 fully written into A is approximately equal to 1,000-word narrative script, capturing the chaos after Nadia's reveal. Section 11, the fallout, is approximately equal to 1,000 words. The aftermath of my reveal was chaos. The night I handed Adrian, Felicity, and Jonah those notes, I expected anger. I expected shouting, even threats. But what I hadn't expected was how quickly their entire facade would collapse. Adrian was the first to erupt. He slammed his fist on the table so hard the glasses rattled. You can't just cut us out like this, he roared. You're my wife. By law, I have rights. You think a few pieces of paper can undo years of marriage? His voice shook with rage, but underneath it, I heard fear. For the first time, Adrian realized he wasn't in control. Felicity sobbed dramatically, clutching the note in her trembling hands. How could you do this to me? She cried. After everything I've done, after all the years I've lived under this roof, don't I deserve something? Her words struck me like cold steel. Deserve. As if my sacrifices had been nothing more than an investment she was entitled to cash out. Jonah paced the room like a predator, his jaw tight, muttering curses. This is insane. She can't do this. We'll fight it. We'll drag her to court if we have to. I stayed calm. my voice steady despite the storm swirling around me. You can try, I said, but you'll lose. Every transaction, every account, every decision has already been secured. And I have Celeste as a witness to your behavior, your cruelty, your toasts, your pressure for me to sign away my rights. Adrian's face turned red, his anger boiling over. She's manipulating you, Nadia. Can't you see it? This so-called nurse has poisoned you against your own family. Celeste stepped forward, her voice sharp. I haven't poisoned her. I've cared for her, which is more than you can say. And if this goes to court, I'll swear under oath about everything I've seen. The air grew heavy. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Adrian stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. The fallout began almost immediately. The next morning, whispers spread through the neighborhood. Our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, had overheard shouting the night before and wasted no time sharing her version with others. Soon, people were gossiping about Adrian's outburst, about Felicity's screaming, about Jonah's curses echoing through the night. Adrian's business partners began to distance themselves. He had been trying to rebuild his reputation after his first collapse, but news of trouble at home gave them second thoughts. Meetings were canceled, deals postponed. One man even told him outright, "We don't invest with chaos." Felicity found herself humiliated among her friends. She had been bragging for weeks about her imminent inheritance, even showing off shopping bags of things she bought on credit. Now, with no money coming her way, her friends began to pull away. One even laughed in her face. So, you're broke and living with your stepmom still? That's rich. Jonah faced his own reckoning. Word spread among his circle that the car he'd been bragging about wasn't coming. His friends mocked him openly, calling him a liar, a boy who counted his chickens before they hatched. His pride took a beating he couldn't hide. Inside the house, the tension was unbearable. Adrian sulked in silence most of the time, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. Felicity snapped at everyone, slamming doors and crying loudly for attention. Jonah avoided me altogether, his glares sharp whenever our paths crossed. But I no longer trembled under their moods. I sat straighter. I spoke with clarity. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one on edge they were. Celeste remained close, offering support in quiet moments. They're unraveling, she said one evening as we sat together in my room. And it's all because you refuse to let them control you. I nodded, my chest swelling with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. For so long I thought I was powerless, I admitted. But I see now. I was their foundation. Without me, they're nothing but greedy children. Adrian tried one last tactic, begging. One night, he came to my room, his voice unusually soft. Nadia, he said, sitting on the edge of my bed. I know I've made mistakes, but we can fix this. Put the money back where it belongs. Think of the family. Think of the kids. I stared at him, searching his face for sincerity. But all I saw was desperation. He wasn't begging for love. He was begging for money. You killed this marriage, I said quietly, my eyes locked on his. The night you toasted to my death, you buried any chance of forgiveness. His face hardened. He stood abruptly and left without another word. After that, things shifted. He stopped pretending to care. The mask was gone. In the days that followed, I felt lighter. Not because the conflict was over, it wasn't, but because I had survived the hardest part. I had faced them, revealed the truth, and taken back control. The fallout wasn't just their unraveling, it was my rebirth. But the ultimate act of revenge was still to come. Word count to 1004 captures the family's implosion after Nadia's reveal, shows Adrian's business decline. Felicity and Jonah's humiliation, and the collapse of their control, ends with Nadia's growing pride and foreshadows her final strike. Would you like me to now continue with section 12? The final blow is approximately equal to 1,000 words, where Nadia makes her ultimate move to secure her freedom and end Adrian's control for good. You said, section 12, the final blow, 1,000 words, J. Revenge. Stories said, Here's section 12 expanded into a full is approximately equal to 1,000-word narrative script, where Nadia strikes her ultimate blow against Adrian, Felicity, and Jonah. Section 12, the final blow, is approximately equal to 1,000 words. It was time to take back everything they had stolen from me. The fallout had shaken the walls of my house, but I knew it wasn't enough. Adrian, Felicity, and Jonah were humiliated, yes. Their reputations were crumbling, their false confidence shattered. But humiliation alone wouldn't protect me. Not while Adrian still schemed, not while Felicity and Jonah still clung to hope that I would weaken. I needed to end it, once and for all. The morning I decided to strike, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Celeste came into my room, carrying my breakfast tray, and found me sitting upright, my journal open. "You're ready," she said softly, her eyes meeting mine. I nodded. It's time. Step 1 was moving my assets completely out of their reach. Though my hidden account was already secure, I wanted to go further. With my lawyer's help, I had arranged for every penny to be transferred into a trust under my sole authority. Only I and one trusted cousin, Mira, had access. Not Adrian. Not Felicity. Not Jonah. Step 2 was stripping Adrian of any claim to my property. While he had paraded around pretending everything would revert to him, he hadn't realized that I had already filed for divorce quietly. My lawyer called it a clean severing. Papers were processed. Signatures completed. And just like that, the man who toasted to my death was no longer my husband. Step 3 was the final, most devastating blow. I sold assets Adrian thought he controlled, an investment property, jewelry he bragged about. Even the second car in the driveway he loved to flaunt. Piece by piece, I liquidated them, turning his illusions of wealth into cold, hard reality. He had nothing left. When Adrian finally realized what I had done, it was a storm. He barged into my room, his face red, papers crumpled in his hand. "You can't do this. You're my wife." "Ex-wife," I corrected calmly. He froze. "What?" "The divorce is finalized," I said evenly. "You signed the papers months ago. You just didn't bother to read them. You thought you were stripping me of my rights, but in reality, you signed away yours." His jaw dropped, his face twisting with disbelief. You tricked me." I met his glare without flinching. "No, Adrian, you tricked yourself. You thought I was weak. You thought I was fading. And in your arrogance, you gave me exactly what I needed to be free." Felicity burst into the room then, her mascara smudged, eyes wide. "You can't do this. Where are we supposed to go? How are we supposed to live?" Jonah followed, his voice sharp with panic. "You can't just cut us out like this. We're family." "Family? Family doesn't toast to your death. Family doesn't mock your weakness. You were never my family, you were leeches." Felicity's face twisted with fury. "You're evil." "No," I said coldly. "I finally learned to protect myself." Adrian tried one last attempt at manipulation, his tone softening. "Nadia, think about what you're doing. We've built a life together. Don't throw it away in anger. Give us another chance." But his words were hollow. I shook my head. "The night you toasted to being rid of me, you ended this marriage. The night you called me dead weight, you lost your right to my love. And the night you pushed those papers into my hands, you gave me everything I needed to walk away." Jonah slammed the door on his way out, cursing under his breath. Felicity collapsed onto the couch, sobbing, not out of grief but out of loss. And Adrian just stood there, his shoulders slumped, his empire of lies crumbling around him. I turned back to my journal, writing calmly as though their chaos no longer touched me. Celeste stepped closer, her voice steady. "You've done it. They have nothing left to take from you." I nodded. "And I'm finally free." But it wasn't just about freedom. It was about justice. For years, I had sacrificed everything, my money, my time, my love for people who saw me only as a resource. Now, With one decisive strike, I had reclaimed it all. In the days that followed, the house felt different. Adrian packed a bag and left, though not before muttering promises of revenge he had no power to keep. Felicity tried staying with friends, but none wanted her entitlement, poisoning their lives. Jonah disappeared most nights, embarrassed by his humiliation. And me? I thrived. I met with my lawyer again, finalizing documents to ensure none of them could ever claim a dime of what was mine. I redirected funds into charities, into scholarships for young women who needed real support, not manipulation. I made sure my money would build futures, not destroy them. The bank account that had once been a secret became my sword. The trust I had secured became my shield. And my voice, the one they had tried to silence, became the weapon that cut their greed down at the roots. One evening, Celeste sat with me on the porch as the sun dipped below the horizon. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. I thought about it, about the years of love I believed in, about the sacrifices I made willingly. A part of me would always mourn the family I thought I had. But regret? No. I don't regret protecting myself, I said firmly. I regret that I had to. But sometimes, the only way to survive is to strike back. Celeste nodded, her hand warm over mine. Then you struck perfectly. I closed my eyes, letting the peace wash over me. The final blow had been struck. The vultures who circled me were scattered. And for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the end. I was standing at the beginning of something new. But with freedom came the chance to build a new life. Word count, to 1006, Nadia delivers the ultimate revenge. Divorce finalized, assets secured, family left with nothing, emotional closure, but still builds to the healing in Section 13. Strong cliffhanger. Would you like me to continue with Section 13? Rebuilding myself is approximately equal to 1,000 words, where Nadia begins reclaiming her life, health, and happiness beyond the shadow of betrayal. You said, Section 13, Rebuilding Myself, 1,000 words. J. Revenge Stories said. Here's Section 13 written into a full is approximately equal to 1,000-word narrative script, showing Nadia's healing, rediscovery, and strength after her final blow. Section 13, Rebuilding Myself, is approximately equal to 1,000 words. For the first time in years, I was free to think about myself. The storm had passed. Adrian was gone. Felicity and Jonah had scattered like leaves in the wind, and the house that once echoed with their cruel laughter finally felt quiet. For so long, silence had terrified me. It meant abandonment, loneliness, being forgotten. But now, silence was peace. In that quiet, I began the slow, deliberate process of rebuilding myself. At first, it was small things. Eating breakfast without the weight of their glares. Sitting in the living room with the sunlight on my face, no longer worried about overhearing their whispers. Walking through the halls without shrinking under their judgment. The simplest freedoms felt like luxuries. Celeste remained by my side, but now her care felt less like necessity and more like companionship. She still helped me manage my health, encouraging me with gentle persistence. "One step at a time," she said each morning as she guided me through stretches. "Your body is stronger than they made you believe." And she was right. With each passing day, I felt the strength return to my muscles, the lightness to my step. The woman who once pretended to fade was gone. In her place stood someone determined to live. I also began to explore the parts of myself I had neglected for years. Painting had once been my passion, but I hadn't picked up a brush in a decade. One afternoon, I set up a small easel in the corner of the living room and let the colors flow. Each stroke on the canvas felt like a declaration. I am here. I am alive. I am mine again. Writing became another outlet. My journal, once filled with despair and betrayal, began to hold stories of hope, notes about the garden I wanted to plant, lists of places I wanted to visit, reflections on the strength it took to survive betrayal. The act of writing reminded me that my voice mattered, that I mattered. With my finances secure, I no longer lived under the shadow of survival. I could finally breathe. I used part of my trust to fund projects that meant something to me. A scholarship for women pursuing education later in life, donations to shelters, and resources for caregivers like Celeste. It was empowering to know that the money once meant to fuel greed was now fueling kindness. My circle of support grew too. I reached out to cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, reconnecting with family who had always wondered why I disappeared into Adrian's world. They welcomed me back with warmth, telling me I had been missed, reminding me that not all family was cruel. I joined a local support group for women who had faced betrayal and financial abuse. Sitting in that circle, I heard stories that mirrored my own women who had sacrificed everything for ungrateful spouses, who had been tricked, used, discarded. Together, we shared, we cried, and we lifted each other up. One woman said to me after a meeting, "You're proof that we can survive, that we can fight back." Her words stayed with me. For the first time, I saw my story not just as tragedy, but as testimony. A reminder that strength isn't the absence of pain, it's the decision to rise despite it. Of course, there were still moments of grief. Late at night, I would sometimes think of the life I thought I had. The family dinners I believed were filled with love. The dreams I once had of growing old with Adrian, surrounded by children who respected me. Losing that illusion was painful, even after everything they had done. But Celeste would sit with me during those moments, offering comfort without judgment. "You lost people who never truly valued you," she said one evening. "That's not your failure, it's theirs." Her words were balm to my heart. With her encouragement, I even began taking small trips outside the house. A walk in the park, a visit to the library, a day trip to the art museum where I stood in awe of paintings I hadn't seen since my 20s. Each outing was a reminder that the world was still vast, still full of beauty, still waiting for me. The more I lived, the more I realized that my identity had shifted. I was no longer Adrian's wife or the stepmother who sacrificed. I was Nadia, the woman who survived, the woman who reclaimed her life, the woman who learned to thrive again. I decided to mark this new chapter with something tangible. One afternoon, I planted a small garden in the backyard. Flowers, herbs, bright bursts of color. With each seed I pressed into the soil, I whispered a promise to myself. You will grow too. You will bloom again. Watching those plants sprout and stretch toward the sun became a metaphor for my own rebirth. And perhaps the greatest freedom came in my heart. For years, I had lived in fear of losing everything. Now I knew I could lose it all and still stand. I had proven to myself that my worth wasn't tied to money, or to a husband, or to stepchildren who never saw me as their own. My worth was in me. One evening, as Celeste and I sat on the porch, the sky painted with streaks of pink and gold, she asked me softly, "What comes next for you?" I smiled, watching the horizon. "Living," I said simply. "Living without fear, without apology. Living for myself." She squeezed my hand, and I knew she believed in me. I opened my journal that night and wrote, "I am no longer defined by betrayal. I am defined by resilience, by courage, by the decision to keep going, no matter who tries to bury me." And as I closed the journal, I realized something else. I wasn't just rebuilding, I was creating something new, something stronger, brighter, and entirely mine. But there was still one last step to close this chapter fully. I knew my story couldn't end with survival alone, it had to become a legacy. Rebuilding myself was more than enough to keep me busy, but deep down, I knew my journey wasn't just about me anymore. I had endured betrayal, cruelty, and abandonment, yet I had risen stronger. That strength wasn't something I wanted to keep locked away in my heart, it was something I wanted to pass on. For years, Adrian, Felicity, and Jonah had tried to erase me, to make me feel like nothing more than a burden. But now, I wanted to ensure that my life would matter long after they were gone from it. So I began to think about legacy. The first step was deciding what to do with the wealth I had secured. That hidden bank account, once my secret lifeline, had grown into more than just money, it was freedom, proof that I had never been powerless. I wanted it to do good, to ripple outward in ways my so-called family could never have imagined. I met with my lawyer again, this time with a new vision. Together, we drafted a final will and testament, not one born of fear or desperation, but of intention. Every dollar, every asset, every piece of value I had was reassigned with purpose. Some went into scholarships for women like me, those who had sacrificed too much, who needed a second chance at education and independence. Some went into charities for caregivers, because I knew firsthand the power of someone like Celeste, whose quiet compassion had saved me. And some went into my own foundation, dedicated to helping women escape toxic relationships and rebuild their lives from the ground up. This was my revenge, not just taking everything away from Adrian, Felicity, and Jonah, but using what they craved to create a future they could never touch. When the documents were complete, I felt lighter than I ever had before. My legacy was safe. My story would outlive their greed. The second step was reclaiming my voice publicly. For too long I had lived in shadows, letting others define me. But with Celeste's encouragement, I began speaking out. I attended support groups not just to listen, but to share. I told my story, how I had sacrificed, how I had been betrayed, and how I had fought back. At first, it was terrifying. My voice shook. My hands trembled. But each time I spoke, I saw the way other women's eyes widened, the way they leaned forward, the way they whispered afterward, "If you can do it, maybe I can too." That was when I realized my legacy wasn't just in money, it was in words, in testimony, in being living proof that no matter how far someone tries to bury you, you can still rise. The third step was simpler, but deeply personal. Forgiveness, not for them, but for me. I would never excuse what Adrian, Felicity, and Jonah had done. Their cruelty was real, their betrayal unforgettable. But I refused to let their memory rot inside me like poison. Forgiveness, for me, meant release. It meant no longer carrying the weight of their actions on my shoulders. One evening, I wrote each of their names on slips of paper. I carried them out to the garden I had planted, the one blooming with color, full of life, and I buried them in the soil. "This is where it ends," I whispered as I covered the slips with dirt. "You no longer own me, you no longer haunt me. You are buried, and I will grow." Tears rolled down my cheeks, but they weren't tears of pain, they were cleansing. For the first time, I felt completely free. From then on, my focus shifted fully toward life. I traveled with Celeste, taking small trips that grew into bigger ones. A weekend by the ocean, where I let the waves wash over my feet. A visit to the mountains, where I breathed air so crisp it felt like a new beginning. Eventually, a trip abroad, where I stood in front of the great works of art I had only ever dreamed of seeing. Each journey felt like reclaiming pieces of myself that I thought had been lost forever. And through it all, I carried my legacy forward. Every painting I made, every speech I gave, every scholarship I funded, was a declaration. Nadia lived, Nadia fought, Nadia triumphed. Adrian, Felicity, and Jonah faded from my story. I heard whispers of their struggles, Adrian drowning in debts, Felicity bouncing from couch to couch, Jonah wasting what little he had. But their downfall no longer defined me. Their suffering wasn't my victory. My victory was in the life I had built, the women I had inspired, the peace I had finally claimed. One night, as Celeste and I sat on the porch, watching the stars twinkle above us, she asked, "Do you ever think about them anymore?" I smiled faintly. "Not often, they were my past, my legacy belongs to the future." And I meant it, because my story wasn't about betrayal, it was about strength. It wasn't about greed, it was about resilience. And it wasn't about what they tried to take from me, it was about what I chose to create in the aftermath. I picked up my journal one last time and wrote, "My name is Nadia, I am 39 years old. I was betrayed, abandoned, and nearly erased. But I rose. I rebuilt. And my legacy is strength." As I closed the journal, I felt a calm settle over me. Not the calm of surrender, but the calm of victory. The kind that comes when you know you've faced the worst and come out unbroken. And that was how I turned their cruelty into my everlasting strength.